Hello, welcome to the conversation on News Central Television. This is a program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings and analysis on the continent of Africa. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Now, as last discussed in our last edition on Monday, we had the COP27 summit begin the conversations on how to address climate change across the African continent. And on today's discussions, we will still continue to discuss on the COP27 summit taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, with issues of climate change funding and efforts to reduce carbon emissions at the front burner. Now, some African leaders have in strong terms condemned the impacts of climate change on the continent, with the Namibian president, Gbenga, describing major polluters as criminals.
Now, aside from COP27, our attention will also be drawn to Nigeria, where the hunter has become the hunted. Chairman of the country's anti-graft agency, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Abdulrasheed Bawa, has been ordered to be remanded in one of the country's top prisons for contempt of court.
I think there's a song like The Hunter Becoming the Hunted, but yes. I wonder who now catches the hunter.
Exactly. Who is going to enforce that decision by the judge? I believe the EFCC has released a statement, and we'll get to that in the course of our discussions. But interesting times in Africa. The peace in Ethiopia is still holding, but I heard violence broke out in some other parts, not in Tigray, in the Oromo region. So I hope it's not going to escalate, because Ethiopians have been through a lot in the last 2 years, and we just pray for peace.
It better not escalate, because we're still having situations in DRC with most of the citizens mobilizing for the military due to the M23 rebels attacking them. We still have Rwanda there by the side. So we do hope, it's like it came like a positive note or hope for the people of Africa when we saw mediation efforts between Ethiopia and Tigray.
And it's instructive to know that even as the world leaders gather in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, there's still breakout sessions, because yesterday, I believe it was, leaders of Central Africa and East Africa did meet to de-escalate the ongoing tensions between DRC and its neighbor Rwanda. That was in Sharm el-Sheikh.
I'm happy for the negotiations, but I do hope that is not just talk, but rather we see things happening, fruitful efforts from these negotiations. But right now on our first topic, it's the ongoing COP27 summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And it has seen growing calls by different heads of state and government for the deepening of emission quotas and more financial backing for developing countries already devastated by the effects of rising temperatures. Now, at the summit, Namibian President Gbenga blamed wealthier nations for the current climate crisis, accusing them of dishonesty in the talks about the fight against climate change.
The Namibian president went on to describe the world's largest polluters as criminals and the world's poorer nations as their victims. In the same way, Malawi's president, Lazarus Chakwera, also said that wealthier countries should take on more responsibility in fighting climate change, while the president of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, criticized international funders for making it difficult for poorer nations to access aid to fight climate change. So joining us to discuss all of this and more, we have Mr. Deji Akinpelu, who's the co-founder of Rethinking Cities, and we have Dr. Geofrey, Eneyo, energy and environmental law analyst, joining from London in the United Kingdom. We also have Tendai Kasinganeti, a climate policy and carbon market specialist, joins us from the Namibian capital, Windhoek. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Now, I'd like to start I'd like to start with Tendai in Windhoek. Your president, President Gbenga, but what do you make of his strong comments about major climate polluters being criminals? I mean, it wasn't the only one with strong words. We also had President Cyril Ramaphosa there, and African leaders really complaining about, the West treatment of Africa when it comes to climate change.
All right. Thank you very much for having me here.
Now, Tendai, the question is directed to you. What do you make of your president's comment about the major climate polluters being criminals?
Well, that is a statement that has got some truth in it because, okay, one of the biggest issues when you look at climate change is that not all countries face the same level of responsibility regarding the climate crisis that we are currently facing. So at the moment, we've got a climate crisis, and the biggest polluters need to take action to reduce their carbon emissions. But also, they have to offset their carbon footprint by supporting environmental projects around the world. But however, for us to achieve that, we need an honest playing ground and taking of responsibility instead of taking lip service. So at the moment, I can say he is right or he is correct because there is a need for us to sit at a table and where we know the truth and responsible countries or developed communities, they take full responsibility and not to appear like they are helping us, but they know that they are the biggest polluters. I can give you, for example, that we have got the world's major polluters, such as China and the US, who have been contributing to pollution since 1975. And the industrialization only started later in Africa. So all those issues, when you put them in an axis, we realize that there is need for responsibility, and responsibility has not been fully taken. There is a little bit of responsibility, but there's no full accountability of the contributions to climate change.
All right, thank you so much, Tendai. Now, Geofrey, I'd like to begin with you also now, and we're looking at how important these discussions are. And you talked about major polluters, major climate polluters being referred to as criminals. Now, if we're looking at all of this, now, how bad is the situation right now in Africa?
Sorry, can you take that again?
Geofrey,
Hello,
can you hear me? Okay, I said, how bad is it for Africa, the situation right now in Africa?
Well, it's really bad. It's really bad. If I am in the shoes of the Namibian president, of course, I wouldn't use that particular term. But of course, the situation is bad because developing countries and least developing countries, especially other countries that are like small island nations, they are the ones who are bearing the brunt of the historical emissions that are actually committed to the atmosphere by developed countries. And so the challenge there is whenever you have a major effect, like for instance, what happened in Nigeria recently with the flooding, because these nations are not adequately prepared because they don't have the financial muscle to immediately address the situation. So it means that they have to bear, they have to suffer for it. But of course, most African countries that don't have the resources, we continue to bank on these nations. So as long as they don't have those resources in place, the situation, I don't know if using the word critical will be the best way to describe it, but it's really a critical time that we are in, because you're not prepared, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the financial, the resources to address these things. And so whenever I have a major crisis like flooding and drought, you tend to suffer more for it. So it's really serious. It's really serious.
Thank you very much, Geofrey. Now, Deji, Akinpelu in Lagos, how much of the recommendations of COP26 have been adopted? A number of skeptics, including the Namibian president, believes the conferences are just a talk shop. You know, every year they gather at these conferences with little action taken to fight climate change. What's your take on this?
Yeah, interesting. You've rightly mentioned how skeptical people are about these conferences, how they almost appear like a talk show just for people to gather and talk, and nobody is actually living up to the promises. From the point where I stand, however, I think Africa needs to, in as much as we need those kind of funding and help, Africa needs to look inwards. and let us show more commitment to our leaders. I'm even very worried if you get all the money that you are asking for when you say the Holy Communion has been poisoned by somebody and somebody else. I'm very worried. Do our leaders really are they really going to make use of those funds to actually fight climate change? The Great Wall of Lagos that was built as a mitigation ended up as an estate for the affluent. So in as much as I probably agree that people are not meeting up with their promises, the Western countries, but African leaders need to look inwards. How committed are they to their climate action plans? States like Lagos, where I sit, has a climate action plan. How does the action plan, how is it reflected in the state budgeting? What we have here right now is when flooding is about to happen, you have early warning signs, but you don't have early actions to mitigate the issues. So it's a bit worrisome. I love your topic. It says sustainability of vulnerable communities. We don't seem to be, our leaders themselves don't seem to be committed to what needs to be done. So while African leaders are pointing one finger at the West, I see them pointing four fingers back at themselves about
and Deji, I'm happy you mentioned that. In mitigating climate change effects, is everything financial? Are there things they could do in terms of urban planning? And because everybody just thinks, throw more money, ask the West for more money, and we'll suffer the effects less.
Yes, so the climate change effects are quite enormous. I'm not too sure there's somewhere where we wouldn't need money, but the little money that we have right now, what are we doing with it? We are just using it to make announcements. Flooding is coming, people should leave to where? Where are they going to? Well, if Lagos is also submerged, what is the emergency plan? Where are people going to move to? You understand? So you're just asking for more money. You're asking for money, but I don't see commitment. Even the little that we have, the little actions, we're seriously affected. Food crisis is everywhere in Nigeria right now because the farms are flooded. Farmers are moving from, I'm doing a documentary presently about Benue farmers moving to the city of Lagos. It's a crisis, and even, the things that don't even involve money, probably, for instance, people don't even know that climate change has an influence over the herdsmen crisis that we are having in the nation. More than ever before, the cattle are going around, they need food more than ever before. There's a whole lot of pressure because of the changing weather condition. So see how resolving a security issue, it's having a multiplier effect on the people as a result of climate change. So things are quite interlinked. Everything is very much interlinked. There's a whole lot more African leaders can do, financially, non-financially, resolving your security issues, giving land rights. Land rights has a whole lot. When you talk about vulnerable communities, when the communities don't have land rights, how can you build infrastructures or put in place actions that will help them? Even when you say the West is oppressing you so much, we are oppressing our own people. The rich of the Africa.
All right, Deji, I want to continue from where you just stopped now. I want to bring Tendai into all this now because, his president was one of the people who made the comments of major climate polluters as criminals. Now, let's look inwards. That's if you agree that we as Africans should look inwards. What exactly have been the climate action plan in Namibia? Or do you believe that African countries should just continue looking for finance from the Western countries? What exactly has been the climate action plan in Namibia?
In Namibia, we have done quite a lot in terms of climate action plans. and putting together strategies to ensure that we build resilience amongst communities, and we also garner amongst the communities, the different stakeholders, as well as the surrounding countries to ensure that we at least reach a situation where we are slowly but surely adapting to the ever-changing climate. In terms of climate action planning, Namibia has been mostly at the forefront in the SADC region in putting together projects or putting together action plans. We've got existing policies and legislative frameworks that talk to climate change and that address climate change. And one of the most important things that should be linked to leadership is that if there is political will, we will see that even the national development plans of Namibia, they speak to climate action and climate change, and institutional frameworks has been put in place to address the worsening situation of climate change. But however, in as much as governments, even across the sub-Saharan Africa, as we are experiencing the worsening situation, there is need for early warning systems. There is need for climate investment. There is need for green finance. We need systems in order. We need to improve food security. We need to protect our resources. And one of the major issues, for example, Namibia is a highly arid area, and desertification is continuously affecting the livelihoods of the people. So when institutional frameworks are there, when the will of the government is there, and national resources are being used, there is always a tipping point where we have to ensure that for us to move from one level to the other in improving our resilience, there's going to be need for climate finance and for investment. And so it's not a matter of us continuously going back, but it's like baby steps. You need to be taught how to walk. And then once we receive enough funds, we can be able to step forward and move on our own. I think there has been quite a drastic change in terms of how climate aid and now the green climate finance, as we talk of it now, it's no longer aid as such, but we're now having sort of like green climate finance, which is more of investment. So we look at the major polluters, the major culprits. They should be able to support the developing countries in Africa, in Asia, wherever they need to be supported to be able to adapt. We are experiencing floods, we are experiencing droughts, and this has been caused by certain nations who are now developed. So why should they not take responsibility? We are not continuously going to them, but we are seeking help. We want them to also take a responsibility of the impacts that we are experiencing, and this has been caused by their activities. So I think it's a synergy that has to be built. It's a synergy that needs to be improved, and to be continuously improved, we still need to meet periodically to review what has been done, what needs to be done in the future, how much has been spent, how much is needed. Are we realizing any progress? What other new mechanisms can be put in place? Now we are talking of carbon markets that are now being implemented. You have got the Article 6 under the UNFCCC. So all these issues can enable countries to adapt to climate change with the help of developed countries. And adaptation is not only for the developing countries. That's also another issue to note. It's the developing communities also need to adapt through investment in the developing communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tendai. I'd like to bring in Dr. Eneyo from in London. Now, Dr. Eneyo, you are an energy analyst, and you know that Africa has the lowest levels of access to energy in the world, and we need this energy to industrialize and also develop. The continent needs energy to grow and improve the lives of its people. Now, considering Africa's energy needs as against Africa's low access to energy, how does Africa balance the quest for energy as against the campaign for climate change? Because yesterday in Sharm el-Sheikh, the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, did highlight what South Africa was doing. He said they're going to retire a few of its coal-fired plants. And we do know the situation with Eskom. They're already struggling to provide enough electricity for its people. So how do we manage this balancing act?
Well, in my thesis, I actually argued this because developed countries, of course, expect that Africa will also put on their shoes and do certain things for themselves. They don't expect that you continue to blame them. But that aside, I am of the opinion, as much as I know that I've also been advocating for countries to rein in their emissions, I'm also of the opinion that African countries, for example, Nigeria, for instance, we have peculiar needs. And so to balance that need to produce our energy, supply our gas and all of that, what we can do, we are not going to say, okay, because we have a commitment under the Paris Agreement and developed countries are asking us to do this particular thing, we need to also cut down our emissions. And because of that, we would leave our gas and our oil on the ground. Our situation is much more peculiar than theirs. They're already developed. The what we can advocate, what we can do as developing country is to seek measures and ways of producing these resources, these gases and the oil in a safe way. For instance, there is now hydrogen gas, which emits low gas, which the pollution quantity from hydrogen gas is much lower than natural gas that you just produced. But of course, we know that natural gas is also a cleaner fuel than oil. And so to balance that it still goes back to the level of investment that we are able to attract into our energy sector. So what we should be thinking about is if we still want to keep our energy resources, we still want to produce our power supply, our gases, produce energy for our people, but we can't do it in a clean way. Of course, that again would require a lot of investment. It takes us back to the support that our country will also need from these foreign countries. For example, in 2016, after Nigeria submitted its first national determined contribution, commitments to the United Nations Secretariat, which is what it planned to do to curb these emissions, Nigeria committed that it's going to reduce this emission by 2030 by 20%. 20% of its emission, it will reduce emission by 20%. That's its target by 2030. But that if it has international support, it's going to increase that commitment to 40. And so that support there means that how we can produce this our energy in a very sustainable, in a clean way. Okay. So that will also, apart from the resources, the money that will be attracted into the sector, technology transfer as well, are measures that can be taken so that if we have these things in place, we will not leave our gas or our oil under the ground. We would need them because our situation is peculiar. We need power, so we'll continue to rely on it.
All right, now still on producing energy in a safe way, Deji, as much as fine, the African countries should look inward, which was your last take. It's one thing when you're doing your own as African countries and developed countries are still doing their own. Talk about industrial revolution, what brought about this rise in climate change. Now, COP27 is happening in Egypt. What should be the interest of African countries? How do we make these developed countries more accountable? Should there be penalties, or should we just continue to talk and have negotiations like we've been doing since the COP26 and other climate COP conferences that we've had?
Okay, well, maybe I clearly have my own biases in terms of making more demands on our own leaders. Definitely things have to, I will agree to a large extent, let us have things hand in hand. While you're asking the West to do more, hold them more accountable, what can we do more to make these demands? I think what we can do more is also back home, show some more dedication and more seriousness and more commitment to our action plans. Our policies are quite very inconsistent in terms of really even trying to do our own part. So they wouldn't really take you serious. extended producer responsibility, a situation whereby you are telling users of plastic to call back plastic waste in communities, and so many African countries are still paying lip service to not making it compulsory that these things should be called back by these producers of plastics. It just shows a lot of inconsistency on your side. So maybe that is why the reluctance is very, very even high on the Western countries, because they look at what you're doing back home and like you're not really taking any good action. If you take more serious action at home, maybe we'll catch more attention globally.
But Deji, sorry to cut you short. It's not like they're doing us a favor. It's for the whole continent. I mean, Africa is, if you would agree, contributes just 4%, and
they do have a moral
responsibility.
Yeah. It's a convenient truth. It's a convenient truth. I'm not saying it's a lie. It's just a convenient truth for our own leaders not to act. That is why you have analogies and description about the church rat and the Holy Communion. That is why somebody will come up with such. You understand? It's just a convenient truth. Why are you a church rat? Why are you a church rat in the first place? You understand? If you're not serious, nobody takes the church rat seriously. You understand? So you two step up, do more. When they see you that you're serious, they'll take you more seriously. You understand? So you always go there with your cap in hand, begging and saying you are the biggest polluter. But you're not consistent. You're not putting in place infrastructures that you should have put in place. How can a state government invest in an infrastructure? You're saying you want to reduce emission, and a government is investing in taxes. Come on. How does that? It's supposed to be mass transit. You're not consistent.
Or electric vehicles. Thank you very much.
Or electric vehicles.
Thank you, Deji, for that point. I believe it's a fine place to go on to wrap up the conversation. Thank you, Deji Akinpelu, co-founder of Rethinking CETAs, joined in from Lagos. Geofrey, Eneyo, energy and environment law analyst, joined from London in England. And Tendai Kasinganeti, joined from Windhoek in Namibia. We do appreciate your insights and contribution to the conversation. Thank you. You're watching The Conversation in News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll be looking at situations in Nigeria where a court has ordered for the chairman of the Anti-Graft Commission to be sent to prison over contempt of court. We'll bring you that story and details when we come back from this break. Do stay with us.